Did you know that when Super Buu absorbs Tien and Yamcha, he actually gets a debuff instead of getting stronger? Now let's go to training and see if that's true.
I found you. All mine. No.
I never knew he got a decrease in power, but Cool Spot did, and that's the first of many secrets, details, and hidden features we'll be going over today, all of which are coming from you guys. If you know any, comment them down below, and maybe you'll be in the next video. Kazuhiro Miller says that there was a voice clip suggesting that we were going to get a Super Saiyan 2 variation of the best fusion of all time, Vegito. Now I did take a look, and there actually was a voice line of this transformation.
Guess I'm Super Vegito 2 now.
Now, Vegito is my favorite, as you can tell, so him getting anything additional, that's a plus. Too bad we never got to see it. The Night Speed says that in the original Tenkaichi, Super Trunks only speaks Japanese when he uses the Finish Buster. Now let's check that out and see if that's true. Now that we know that it's in English, let's see if the Finish Buster is in Japanese. Now that's absolutely insane. Did Raging Blast 2 do a little foreshadowing? Raphael Gabriel seems to think so, with Gogeta at this time only mainly being shown with the orange jacket up until the Dragon Ball Super Broly movie where he gets the yellow variation, which in my opinion looks so much better. Now there are some differences between the old and new Gogeta, mainly being the hairline. OG Gogeta has closer to Vegeta's hairline, while the newer Gogeta has kind of a more similar to Goku hairline. Now, maybe this was some foreshadowing, but I think it may be a reach. Now, there were a lot of Mandela effects or just straight up imagination playing tricks in the comments. For example, iamConcept says he swears in Tenkaichi 3 with Ginyu swap that there was a small chance that you turn into a frog, and he remembers it happening. Now, we all know he did body swap with a frog in the series, but this was never a feature in Tenkaichi 3 when using Ginyu. You can only randomly change between Goku, Gohan, Krillin, Jeice, Vegeta, or Nail. Now, I think it would have been cool if they had like a dud where you randomly did turn into the frog, but that might have been broken too. Another example is Hammond Vocals explaining how he got Super Saiyan 3 with Vegeta in Budokai 2. Now, Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta didn't appear until Raging Blast, but there was a possibility that he was playing a modded version or something, because like I played Budokai AF in my childhood. Calling back to a previous video, I talked about how everybody's Kamehameha wave was yellow, making it manga accurate in Budokai 1. But there was actually one character that has a blue Kamehameha, and that's Cell. Now, we did come to the conclusion that they are manga accurate, but we never saw Cell in full color because the full color manga was only released up into the Frieza saga. So does that mean Cells would have been blue in the manga too? Let me know what you think or what you know down below. Xavier Love Pancake pointed out that if Goten is your partner in Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, that he does the Kamehameha, which is a reference to how he actually mispronounced the move when he first did it. Also, if I'm not mistaken, he has said it like that in other games. Mega Man Eric says in Budokai Tenkaichi 3, when you select Teen Gohan's Turtle Hermit Gi from BoJack Unbound, his base form hair will be shaped slightly different, and it's a reference to how neater it looked in that movie compared to how messy it was in the series. Let's check that out. Now tell me, which version of Gohan do you actually prefer? Brian Kangatar had a fun fact for Budokai 2. Now, some of the angles for the ultimate moves were adjusted in the GameCube release opposed to the PS2 release. The beam in Teen Gohan's father-son Kamehameha wave in the PS2 is smaller and more transparent than in the GameCube version, which has a bigger burst. Let's see. which one you prefer. And also let me know if you have any other details or hidden secrets that you know of. Comment them down below. Till next time, peace. Did you know that in Tenkaichi 3, some characters have to use a full moon to transform into a grade 8? This includes Bardock. The alternative being the Power Ball, where the character will create a false moon to trigger the transformation.
Let me show you what I can do!
Now in the Ocean Dub, Vegeta said that Bardock invented the move, but apparently this was abandoned because of a mistake on the translator's end. But do you know what wasn't a mistake? Over the years, there have been several instances of voice lines in these games having either vulgar language, mishaps, and pop culture references. For example, in my previous video, I mentioned Zangya referencing the Pussycat Dolls song Don't Ya, and how Trunks uses the Finish Buster in Japanese. There are more instances of this happening though. There is a hilarious voice line reference that happens if you choose Grandpa Gohan and happen to lose the battle.
I fallen and I can't get up.
This is a reference to the catchphrase popularized in the commercials for the medical alert systems Life Call and Life Alert. You think Grandpa Gohan saw those commercials?
I've fallen and I can't get up.
Now we all know how much Yamcha is the laughingstock of the Dragon Ball world, but I think the developers took a break from making fun of him for 1 second to pull somewhat of a prank on Frieza. Now as you all know, he's one of the strongest villains, and some of the ultimate attacks in this game actually cause damage to the environment. Frieza has a move called Destroy the Planet, but funnily enough, it cannot destroy the planet.
This is getting dull.
So much for my favorite villain. Speaking of ultimates with destructive properties, Budokai 3 features many ultimates that are really powerful, some even destroying the planet, but that's only if you win the minigame as the attacker. Otherwise, you will get a weaker version, or you will not do the ultimate altogether.
Share your energy with me.
That is unless you're Majin Vegeta, as he has the only ultimate attack in the game that will destroy the planet whether you fail or succeed the minigame.
I'm gonna blow you to bits. Fight me. That was pretty fun.
Now there are some smaller details that would go unnoticed, but I wanted to shed some light on them. For example, in a previous video, I mentioned the update to Goten's Ghost, where they copy his transformation whether he's in Super Saiyan 1 or 3. Now in the HD collection, not only do they copy the transformation, but when Goten spews out the ghost, is actually a ghost instead of just a cloud. And it goes to show how the smallest details bring the whole experience together. Now, we're all familiar with the many transformations in Dragon Ball, and sometimes they're literally earth-shattering. And this carries over as another small detail in Tenkaichi 2, because when you transform your rocks, they will crumble as you complete your transformation, showing the power that you have now, like they did in the show. Everybody knows that Devilman has a Devilmite beam that only damages you if you have some evil in your heart.
Are you ready?
What's the matter? Come get me. There you are.
Well, that only happens if he's transformed into Super Saiyan. Let's look at base form. This happens because he isn't an evil person, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's ineffective because he's a good person either. In the manga, Baba likens Goku to an infant or an animal of some sort, and I say that that's pretty spot on. Those things aren't inherently evil, so that would give the beam no effect. And that's all for today. If you know any details, comment them down below, as I'd love to discuss them, and maybe they could be in the next video. And thank you to Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring this video. Remember, use my QR code or the link in the description. And until next time, peace. You know that in Tenkaichi 3, if Krillin uses the Destructo Disc against Android 18, that they're pink instead of yellow? Now that's real love. But this detail, while small, is one of the many details that we'll go over today. But before we get into that, I would love if you like and subscribe for more content like this. In a previous video, I mentioned Frieza's Planet Destroyer not being able to destroy any planets. Unfortunately, I recorded it on a stage that's indestructible. So here it is on a stage that is. Yeah, this move cannot destroy anything. And as an extra, I can throw in that he has a typo for one of his moves, and it says, "I might die this time." It's supposed to be, "You might die this time," but it was a simple oversight and possibly some unfortunate foreshadowing from Frieza. Tenkaichi 2, in my opinion, is tied with Tenkaichi 3 for the best in the series, and I thought I knew a good bit about the game, but I didn't know that in the PAL Wii version of the game, they have 5 exclusive characters in a pool: King Piccolo, Frieza Soldier, Pilaf Machine, and Cyborg Tao. Speaking of Cyborg Tao, he has a very interesting mechanic given that he is a cyborg. Now, we're all familiar with the solar flare and how it blinds people, and they even shut their eyes during it. Well, this doesn't happen to Cyborg Tao. I don't see too many people using Cyborg Tao, but it is the small things like this that show the passion that the developers had while making this game.
Final round.
Super Dragon Ball Z is one of the most underrated Dragon Ball games, and I think it should be covered more because it actually has a few interesting things going on, like Chi-Chi, for example. This is the only game that features Chi-Chi in her bikini armor as an adult. And I feel like they snuck this one in not only to, reference her old costume, but also for those people that are on Reddit. You know who you are. Now, previously, I've mentioned different voice clips and how they make pretty good pop culture references, or it can be vulgar, like when Goten switches out, or the interaction between 18 and Zangia.
Your man's kind of cute. Skank.
But the most interesting voice line that I've heard comes from Grade 8 Baby. If he's chosen, he says, now this is the flip on the phrase spanking the monkey, which is something you do by... We're not even gonna get into that. Super Saiyan 4 Vegeta has an insane move called the Spirit Breaker Cannon. Unfortunately, it was probably deemed too brutal, and it was changed in Tenkaichi 3. Now, why the change? I would assume the same reason Broly's moves were changed. It's just too brutal, but it is what it is. Now, this one doesn't have anything to do with Dragon Ball games necessarily, but more so a Dragon Ball stage. In J-Stars for the PS3, Luffy can fight underwater, which makes absolutely no sense because he's a devil fruit user and that permits him from being able to swim. That's all for today. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time, peace.
Did you know that the Angry Kamehameha Wave is the wrong color and it's fired with the wrong hand in Tenkaichi 3? Now, it's always been shown to be yellow and to be fired with the left hand, but in this game, it's fired with the right and it's blue. I guess it's to keep it in line with the other Kamehameha waves, but I mean, it's a slight little detail. Now, this is one of the many details that we'll be covering today, but before we move on, I would love if you would like and subscribe for more content like this. Now, speaking of things being incorrect, everybody was on my head about Goku being in base form in the manga during the father-son Kamehameha. Now, I will admit, I was wrong, and I was just used to the anime depiction, but the devs got this incorrect too in Tenkaichi 3, because Gohan uses two hands and then he switches to one hand. Now, I thought maybe it's because he isn't battle damaged, but at that point, why even make him change to one hand? It's a little nitpicky, but they were wrong too, so shut up. Some versions of Budokai 2 have an extra level in the Dragon World, which is the story mode of this game. And this extra level makes references to the Nekomajin manga. Dende and Mr. Popo are replaced by characters from the series, and occasionally one of the other characters will appear in the background and actually transform into a Super Saiyan. Going back to this extra stage, this is actually where Tiencha, the fusion between Yamcha and Tien, is introduced, and he is the only person other than Goku that you can actually use on the stage. You can even fight him. Staying with Budokai 2, we have all tried at least once to catch up to Babidi, but he just runs. But through hacking, you can finally see what happens when you catch up to him. You go right into a fight, and it's actually against Dr. Zero. Beat'em doesn't do anything, but at least Babidi can't run anymore. The PSP games were some of the best, and they included some interesting mechanics. Prime example, Broly. They did an amazing job making sure that he was menacing, even down to the way he shakes the screen when he walks. Also, everybody in this game has an animation for dodging, except for Broly. He just stands there and tanks hits instead of dodging, and it really helps sell his character as being the legend that he is. Staying with the PSP games, Tenkaichi Tag Team is a game that I did not get a lot of time in. It was the last entry in the Tenkaichi series coming out in 2010, but in every other game, once you fused, you were fused permanently. And this game was the first and only in the Tenkaichi series to feature the fusions actually defusing during battle. Shifting back to the console games, Budokai 1 specifically, Goku has a very interesting alternate costume. Now, it's a reference to the cover of the 10th volume of Dragon Ball Z on the 26th if you're following the Japanese version, since it isn't split from OG Dragon Ball. There's another character that also seems to either reference this costume or it's just all a coincidence. That character is Terry Bogard, specifically the Wild Wolf variation. Now, as you can see, it's extremely similar, but I mean, it's a pretty basic fit too. If you guys know any more about this, please drop some info down below, because the influence Dragon Ball seems to have it's quite interesting. Another interesting inclusion to me is Sin Shenron in Infinite World. The Shadow Dragon makes a return from Budokai 3 where he's pretty broken, but I guess they decided to nerf him to hell this go around because he doesn't have any access to his supers until you transform to Omega. Now, I did try to look into why this could have been, but I couldn't find any reasoning. If you know why he's restricted like that, I would love to know. Dragon Ball Z Kakarot is already almost 4 years old, but it introduced a lot of new fans to the world of Dragon Ball, and it actually introduced a character that many of us weren't familiar with. And it's actually Dr. Gero's wife, who makes an appearance in Capsule Corps and is the basis for Android 21. Now, we do know her name. I'm not saying it because I'm not about to butcher it, but there it is. But if you did, by the end of this video, I promise you, you'll know something about Goku that you didn't before.
These are secrets about Goku that you missed in Dragon Ball video games. We all know Goku to be one of the strongest in the Dragon Ball universe, but at the time of Budokai 1, he was really the strongest in the game. This game had a 10% increase to attack power for each transformation, meaning whoever had the most transformations would be the strongest. And guess who has the most transformations in the game? The video is about Goku. Who else would it be? The transformations, along with the combination of capsules you can give him to increase his attack, make him legit broken. But imagine if this was still a thing like now. Him going from Kaioken ×5 all the way to like Master UI would be absolutely insane.
Let me have some of your energy.
This game also does something that surprisingly doesn't happen in a lot of the games. But in the series, Goku wore a lot of different gis with different symbols, and they told you who he was training under at the time. And throughout the sagas, this obviously changes. Goku's gi actually changes based on which part of the story you're playing, and that does not happen in a lot of the other games. This is one of the reasons though why I think that this game still holds up visually. Speaking of his gi, one of the most iconic variations of his gi didn't get introduced as a playable costume in the Budokai games until Budokai 2, and not even in the original US release. It came in the Japanese version and the GameCube version as an additional costume. The tattered gi paired with the Super Saiyan is a classic combo, and it shouldn't be left out of any game in my opinion. They also used Budokai 2 to continue his streak of being kind of broken by having him have the most ultimates in the game. He had the Warp Kamehameha, the Spirit Bomb, and of course, the Super Spirit Bomb.
You are awesome! I can't wait to see what you'll do next time. Later! Hey, oh!
Now, Budokai 3 didn't add much in terms of secrets that I felt like you guys didn't already know, but if you do know some, you can comment them down below. The only thing that I could find that is somewhat of a secret is his Halo costume, and the only way that you can even access that is through the code, which can be seen right here. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I actually do really like the costume. The Halo, it just adds, I don't know, it's something about it. Infinite World seemed to shift the focus to GT Goku when it came to the details because he has one of the best ultimates in the game, hands down.
You. Even if you apologize, I will never forget you.
This animation of the Super Kamehameha in particular is a reference to how he got rid of Staff Officer Black in the movie Dragon Ball Path to Power. It's more reminiscent of how Master Roshi would do the full Kamehameha, but with some extra flair from the camera going around. And I think it's easily the best looking ultimate in the game, if not the whole series. He also has some cut content as he was going to be playable on Snake Way. Now I do kind of wonder why they didn't make him playable. Maybe he was too short, so he travels less distance per stride or something, making it harder, if not impossible, to complete with a respectable time. Or not to mention, the controls were already like super wonky. Remember when I said a lot of the games don't actually even change his gi? Well, Tenkaichi 1 is one of them. This whole game stuck him in his late gi and just kind of went for it. Now, it isn't that big of a deal to me personally, but I know that, you know, this burns the purest blood not being able to see Goku with his feet out. Another interesting thing about the Tenkaichi series are the interactions between characters. And the most interesting one to me regarding Kid Goku specifically is his response when people refer to him as Kakarot. He says,
Kakarot, is that you?
I'm not this caca whatever guy.
and this comes from the 17th manga volume chapter, Tales of Future Not Quite Past, in which adult Goku says this to Raditz when Raditz calls him Kakarot. Now, obviously Kid Goku has his memory wiped, you know, when he fell and he bumped his head. But Tenkaichi 2 takes it a step further and makes it to where Goku seems to think that him and Kid Goku are two entirely different people.
How come you're wearing an outfit that looks like mine?
You look just like I did when I was little.
Now I guess this does kind of make sense, because if you saw your younger self in front of yourself and didn't have any memory of that, then it would have to be another person, right? Now I did mention something about a one-hit KO Spirit Bomb, right? Well, in Tenkaichi 3, Goku actually gets the ability to gain energy from everything around him, just like he did in the series, so he can charge the Spirit Bomb. Now you can charge it up to 3 times, and this actually changes the damage output significantly. So much so that you can actually one-shot most people, if not all, with the right setup. Now it's hard to pull off, but it's more than possible.
Share your energy with me. You're not getting away with it. Here it comes. Go!
Okay, let's see what games are next.
Later.
The roster in the first Budokai game is actually not a bad one, considering it only covered up to the Cell Saga. You get Goku with all of his transformations up to that point, Buff, Trunks, and Vegeta. Even Metal Frieza makes an appearance. But even with all these inclusions, there were some characters that were going to be playable that just didn't make the cut. These characters are Qui, Cell Jr., and the Cybermen. Now while they're not the craziest characters, I think it still would have been cool to play with them. You can use hacks to access them within the game, but they're clearly not completed characters, given away by the fact that they have no skill capsules. Some remnants of them being playable still remain though, with them appearing in the story and there being voice clips for them appearing in the World Tournament.
Cyberman versus Cell Jr. versus Kui versus.
This isn't the last instance of characters being cut though, but the characters that were cut in later entries in the series will definitely surprise you. But before we get there, let's stop and take a look at Budokai 2. What I consider to be the black sheep of the Budokai series, largely due to the fact that it's not as deep as Budokai 3 and the Dragon World story mode. This mode resembled a board game and very loosely followed the Dragon Ball Z story as we knew it. It made you fight multiple times by moving across the board, making the gameplay feel very repetitive. But for some reason, this one is my favorite, and it'll always have a place in my heart. The next thing I want to talk about though is actually in this mode. In stages 5 and 6, Babidi is the main villain for this part of the story, and he has his own piece. Now normally he isn't accessible to the player, but with hacks you can catch up to his piece. Now this was never intended to happen, so there's no dialogue or anything, and it goes directly into a fight. But not with Babidi. Instead, it's against Android 20. And the fight doesn't give you any rewards or anything. It actually requires you to restart the story mode, but I think it's neat how the game manages to use placeholders to keep the game functioning. On the complete opposite end of the spectrum, Tenkaichi 2 had one of the best story modes in the series, covering the main story of Dragon Ball Z, GT, and even some of the movies. They went even further beyond and included some what-if scenarios. One of the scenarios that didn't make the cut though was revolving around Yamcha. Now it was about him escaping being the joke character of the series, turning away from mediocrity. Now Yamcha is one of my favorite characters in terms of design, and his moveset was always really cool, but in the end, you know how it goes when it comes to Yamcha. He never wins. So in the end of this one, he dies. But you never guess who actually saves the day.
Kamehameha! Cell's shining moment had come. The battle against the big Getty star would be decided by this final showdown. This doesn't look good. Hold on, Cell's getting weak. But just then, the fallen Cell Juniors gave their power to Cell. No! Impossible! And so, thanks to Cell and his offspring, Earth was saved. But none of this would have been possible without Yamcha. Thus concludes this tale of a world that might have been if Yamcha had taken center stage.
Now I would have loved for this to have been playable regardless of how wacky it is, and I think they should do more stuff like this going forward. Tenkaichi 3 continued with the cutting of extra missions. In this game, they introduced themed missions that you could play through in a mode called Mission 100. It's a pretty fun mode to play if you haven't, but there is some data in the game that suggests that there were some extra unused missions. But they aren't really missions, they're trash data, and there is a detailed explanation if you want to dive deeper into it, But long story short, they're just some mission entries that were wrong. The Xenoverse series was a pretty big deal, letting us create our own warriors and letting our imaginations run wild, putting moves together that we've never seen before. But they were going to take it even further by putting some moves on characters that we've never seen them use.
Give me energy! Give me energy!
Final Flash! Dragon Fist!
Huh? We're doing this? Okay. A right and a right, left, 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 spin and turn, and a great big smile. I'm better than Vegeta, no?
Now, there are a ton more, but imagine Broly doing a Final Flash for real. Insane. But the greatest mechanic that was cut from Xenoverse 2 has to be the fact that you could deflect beams. Now, this has existed in previous games like Raging Blast 2, but the execution is much different in that every Super and Ultimate had this deflection property added to it, but it's set to false. However, there is a video that shows what happens when you set it to true and actually try to deflect beams. Now, this was clearly removed for balancing reasons and possibly for online behavior. There is no telling what would have happened if you tried to deflect a beam with the netcode that Xenoverse has. With everything that was taken out of these games, I believe Budokai 3 has to be the most interesting. Similar to Budokai 1, there are files in the game that imply that there were way more characters that were going to be playable. There are 5 in total, including Zarbon, Dodoria, Android 19, and Supreme Kai. The voice clips that imply that they're playable come from the World Tournament, just like in Budokai 1.
Zarbon versus Dodoria versus Shin versus...
Now, Zarbon, Dodoria, and 19 not being included was weird, and the fact that they appeared in the first Budokai and shouldn't have taken that much to implement. As for Supreme Kai, I think that he got cut somewhere early along with the other 3. Now, there are 2 more characters that I want to talk about that got a little further along in development and would have been interesting to see. Those 2 being Bulma and First Form Frieza, kinda. Frieza has a character model that doesn't get used, and it's the one in his hover chair. It's thought that it was supposed to be used for the story mode, since he can be loaded into that mode where you can see him on the map, but it's not complete due to the hover chair being a completely different model. Given that Frieza is my favorite villain, I would have loved to see him have his own little Dragon Universe adventure, but Broly having one was cool too. Now, the final character that was cut was Bulma. Bulma seemingly made it the furthest in the development, not only being able to be swapped into battles and be somewhat functional, but if you have access to or have ever seen the behind the scenes of this game, you can see Bulma's voice actor recording lines for her.